So whenever I talk about click-through rates, conversion rates, CPCs, and ACOS, and I try to break things down and say, hey, let's just think about it. ACOS is just spend and sales, and that's it. People always push back on me, and they say, this is way too simple. We already know this. You're wasting our time. And I guess I just want to defend myself really quickly, because what I'm trying to get us to do, and everyone who's taking this course, is I'm trying to get us to practice what is called reasoning from first principles. And I asked ChatGPT really quickly in between recordings here, because I was wondering, how often is this practice? Because people say that they know these things, but I don't actually see them doing it when trying to explain data to clients or actually optimize campaigns. So I asked Chat, how common is this? And also, how would you define it? And it said, the concept of reasoning from first principles is a foundational way of thinking that originates from philosophy and has been popularized in various fields such as science, engineering, business, and Amazon PPC. I added Amazon PPC. The idea is to break down complicated problems into their most basic, fundamental truths and then reconstruct a solution from the ground up. Elon Musk likes to do this, he says, but it says, despite its effectiveness, reasoning from first principles is not as commonly employed as one might hope. There are several reasons for this, and then here's why it says people don't do this. Number one is cognitive effort. This type of reasoning requires a high level of cognitive effort and critical thinking, which many people find taxing or time-consuming. So that's made the main thing here, and that's part of why we made this course, is we want you guys to start practicing thinking hard, thinking through these issues. The second thing it says here is that educational systems, that traditional educational systems often emphasize memorization over critical thinking. So that's probably another reason. And then status quo, social, cultural factors, a few other issues, or lack of awareness. Not everyone is aware of this approach and how to apply it effectively. So just so you know, that's why we're doing this. And that's why we're going through the most basic elements, and don't get lost in the oversimplification of things, because we're not just trying to tell you the definitions. We're trying to show you how to think critically so that you can do this on your own and become a better Amazon PPC manager. So when we're talking about ACOS, yes, it is spend over sales, but I want to think a little more conceptually here. And we're going to say, instead of spend, we're going to say cost per click, because that's one of our biggest levers that controls spend. And instead of doing sales, we're going to say conversion rate, which, these are, I think, really good, coming off of a couple lessons ago where we were talking about these metrics in particular and how to interpret and understand these and all this. So the most helpful, influential thing, I think, if anyone's ever looking at their ACOS and they're seeing it went from 1 month to the next, the biggest thing you want to look at is what changed. Did CPCs increase month over month, or did conversion rates decrease month over month? And that will be your answers. Now, sometimes you get both, and then you got to look at both. But let's look at these in isolation. Let's just say month over month, your ACOS went from 30 to 40%, and you saw there was no change in conversion rate, but only a change in your CPC. Well, now you know what the issue is. You know that we have to rein in those bids. There's a few troubleshooting steps that we would do here. We would want to look at, okay, are we using any form of dynamic bidding? If anything that's dynamic up and down, I would turn off and switch it to down only if those were the campaigns that were contributing to the higher ACOS. But we're going to have a whole other section more specifically on how to calculate these CPCs, because there's a lot that goes into it. We have a lot of advanced models for how to calculate the bids, how to factor in the campaign placement settings. So all of that we'll cover there in more detail later. But if the conversion rate is the issue here, then the next big items we want to look at are what could be influencing the conversion rate changes. So it could be something like, did our keywords change? Did anything with our ads change? Were we updating our creatives? And actually, I will start putting a couple items down here. So a little of this is going to be a review from the previous lesson. But with CPC, we essentially want to check primarily just bids, dynamic, if it's on, and placements. And then for, which color do we want, guys? Purple, pink, conversion rate. We can look at our, what stage of funnel are we at? Funnel, that's driving the traffic. We can look at our overall, just all of our targeting, our keywords, product targets, auto targeting. And then we can look at, of course, always product. You always want to see, did anything change? And this is product listing, not product targets. Did anything change on the product itself in relation to its pricing, its images? Maybe a really poor negative review came through. Another big item here is going to be seasonality, obviously. Coming off of Prime Day or going into Q4, or if you have a product that just maybe sells a lot on Father's Day, those are all other issues that you want to be keeping in mind. Oh, that's actually a really good example of that. So I see this happen all the time, where going into something like Prime Day or Father's Day, people begin ramping up their bids, ramping up their CPCs because they want to be more aggressive. There's a bigger opportunity for sales. And what they're doing is they are bringing up their bids in relation with the conversion rates kind of simultaneously. So as those conversion rates increase leading into Father's Day, usually the big peak of a couple days out from Father's Day for all the gifts buying, their CPCs have increased and their ACOS didn't rise that whole time while their CPCs were increasing. Over the course of like a couple of weeks, they're slowly ramping up together. But immediately after the event, conversion rates drop. And if people aren't quick to adjust their CPCs to pull them back down, then you're going to run into those problems. And so immediately following Father's Day or Prime Day, you have to, if you're expecting this conversion rate drop from basically the time period before to immediately after, if you're expecting that conversion rate to drop, let's just say 20%, you want to bring the CPCs down proportionally at 20%. Because the way in which this interaction works is, we're going to say your ACOS here is, we're just going to say it's 30%, I guess, because 30 is typically a good number. And your CPC and your conversion rate, fixed, doesn't matter what they are. If your conversion rate doubles, so we'll just say times 2, maybe before you were at $1 and you double it. And so we'll just say your CPC is $1 and your conversion rate is 10%. So hypothetically, if your ACOS is 30%, your CPC is $1, conversion rate is 10%, what happens if you double your CPC while conversion rate stays flat? How much is your ACOS going to increase by? It's going to double. It's going to go up to 60%. And that's by pure virtue of math, which we'll talk. I mean, hopefully that makes sense, but essentially the one-to-one correlation between CPC and conversion rate is that tightly connected, where if CPC is double and conversion rate stays the same, your ACOS will double. But if your conversion rates also doubled, so this went up to $2 and this went up to 20%, then your ACOS stays flat. Now, I guess this is probably a little bit confusing because I guess it's not necessarily accurate. I'm not saying $1 divided by 10% equals 30%. So if that confused anyone, sorry, that's not what I mean. What I really mean, and maybe to make it extra clear, is we should say not that ACOS is just CPC divided by conversion rate, but the delta, so the amount that it changes here. So the change in ACOS is going to be equal to the change in CPC divided by the change in conversion rates. And so that's where we're saying if your CPC doubles and your conversion rate doesn't double, the change in your conversion rate is going to be a double. So that would spike to 60%. Conversely, let's say if we had it like this, if you were able to, let's just say you can increase your conversion rate by, let's say you cut it in half. So if you decrease your conversion rate by 0.5, conversion rates decrease by 50%. But if you're able to reduce your CPCs by 40%, and you can simultaneously you can reduce the CPCs faster than your conversion rates are falling, you would actually see that your ACOS actually comes down. Around, my mental math is guessing that should be around a 20% reduction in ACOS, but I've stressed on camera, so maybe I'm not getting that right. But this is important to keep in mind, because when you're going into periods of seasonality, if you can at least estimate, how much you think that conversion rate is going to be rising or falling, you can sort of preemptively adjust those CPCs to rise and fall with it. But at least now you know exactly how to be troubleshooting a rising ACOS and certain elements to be looking at. Now, if we want it to be absolutely technically correct, there's one other variable which we can also pull in here. So it's not, I did simplify it a little bit by saying it's only CPCs and conversion rate, but technically we should also be adding in its conversion rates multiplied by, and we're going to do delta AOV. So your average order value. And yeah, that's a triangle to represent change. Now, because conversion rate and average order value combined are what are essentially creating your sales, that's why we're putting those on the denominator. So with our add cost of sales, we're basically putting sales down here, and then our spend is just our cost per click. But that's where actually increasing your average order value can also help reduce your ACOS. But you have to keep in mind, conversion rate and average order value are so closely linked that if you just raise the prices on your products by it trying to increase that average order value, you might disproportionately lose on the conversion rate side of things. So a 10% increase in your product's prices here could lead to a 20% decrease in conversion rate, which is the net of that is going to disproportionately lower your sales and therefore spike your ACOS, even if your CPCs were the same. So that's just one other thing to keep in mind. And then to the kind of flip side of that, sometimes you can actually increase your average order value and increase your conversion rates simultaneously if the way in which you're doing that is through these bundles and deals where you're saying, hey, if you buy this more expensive product, it's on sale, or if you buy 2 of these, it's on sale. And if you can simultaneously grow that conversion rate and the average order value, then now you're really making money, and your ACOS is going to be getting so much better that you're going to be in much better condition. So just to kind of recap these elements, again, these are essentially the 3 factors that we can try to influence or control, or at least troubleshoot at the very least, right? Going back to that lesson on breaking apart the data and understanding what's actually happening in our accounts. If you have a rising ACOS, look at either CPC, conversion rate, AOV. See where the majority of the change came from. Most of the time, CPC and CVR are the big movers. AOV typically doesn't move that much. That's why we left it out at the beginning. These are the main ones that you want to be looking at. If your CPCs were the primary mover, I mean, they're both going to move a little bit, right? But if like month over month, if conversion rate like was fluctuating, 5%, and CPCs were fluctuating 20 or 30%, it's like, all right, let's look in more specifically to these CPCs and what's going on there. And vice versa, if it was conversion rate that was wildly swinging. If you are seeing after you're now analyzing these, whichever one's having the biggest movement, if it is coming from CPCs, stick around for the lesson. We will talk about how to really, really get these dialed in. And that's most of the time when I'm taking over an account and I'm seeing that ACOS is going crazy. Most of the time it is the CPCs have been ineffectively managed. And so that's kind of where, at least for me personally, that's where I spend a lot of my time, is making sure that the bids are right and the placements are right. And then always just double check the dynamic bidding up and down settings, because that's obviously going to make a big difference as well. If you do find out that it's coming from conversion rates primarily, now it's going to be a little bit more work to see what's going on. I typically like to start with the product just because it's a little more all-encompassing, but just see if anything changed with the products that you're advertising from one month to the next. Double check the seasonality, double check those larger trends, that macros, like we were talking about. But and we can throw it on here as well. Macro. But if none of these were at play, if it's just like, hey, over the course of the month, nothing changed with the product, nothing changed macroeconomically, seasonality, then you most likely do have that targeting issue. And so you're going to want to start doing a deep dive on your search term reports. Perhaps your auto targeting campaigns are pulling in a lot of irrelevant search terms. Perhaps the actual amount of spend allocation across your account has been shifting around from more branded keywords to non-brand keywords. And that's just driving a whole different type of traffic to your products, which is causing your total conversion rate to decrease. You can also, the placement is also going to make a big difference here. We typically see that those conversion rates are much higher at top of search. And so perhaps your placements shifted around. But yeah, you'd be starting to go through your targeting reports, double check those campaign placement settings. And those placements go into CPCs, but they're kind of both for conversion rates as well. And if really just the issue is just kind of a macroeconomic thing, the best way to kind of pull these conversion rates back, especially for just a really short term, just until you can kind of gain back some traffic and momentum, is by running these deals, especially with products that are suffering, products that need a little bit of a boost, getting back up onto the top of search, where Amazon for some reason has deemed them not super relevant for that keyword because perhaps Amazon's noticed that the conversion rates on the product have dropped, and you're just kind of caught in a negative spiral where lower conversion rates means worse placements, which means worse conversion rates, which means worse placements. And you just want to fight back on that a little bit and try to spur your way back up so that you can get better placements where conversion rates are higher, so that your product can be recognized as being a better converting product and therefore get more placements. So that's where those deals can really come in helpful as well. So I hope that makes sense. If you just really drill down on your understanding of CPCs and conversion rates and get to the point where just at a glance, when you see a conversion rate, and this applies to campaigns, your total account or individual campaigns, it's the main thing I always look at whenever I see, why does this campaign have a really high ACOS? I just look at the CPC, and I look at the conversion rate, and I just look at which one seems off. And if the CPC seem off, I know, okay, I need to optimize the bids. If the CPC seem fine, and by that I just mean like close to average for our account, assuming the account's ACOS is pretty good. So like if our total account ACOS is 30%, but there's a certain campaign that has a 60% ACOS, I don't even have to do any troubleshooting just yet. What's the CPC? If the CPC is $2 on that compared to $1, that's the problem. Optimize the bids. If the CPCs are $1 and in line with our average, but the ACOS is still 60%, that means our conversion rate is basically 50% lower compared to everything else. We might have some bad keywords in there. We'd have to go through the search report, double check what's going on, double check our placements, all that kind of stuff. So this is just going to make it very quick and easy for you to troubleshoot high ACOS on any campaign in particular or the account overall. So I hope that makes sense, and I'll see you around on the next lesson where we're talking about the same concept, but we're now stepping away from these ratios of ACOS and we're jumping into actual sales volume and seeing what it is that drives sales. See you there.